Today, we are diving into one of the biggest, most universal human experiences there is, the fear of death. It's that thing that kind of sits in the back of our minds, a low-level hum of anxiety that shapes our decisions in ways we don't even realize. But what if we could drag it out into the open, not with some kind of religious dogma or dense philosophy, but with a clear, logical framework? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do, using the lens of Kelvin H. Chin's incredible book, Overcoming the Fear of Death. Let's figure out how to turn this fear into fuel for a better life. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote these words, and they just cut right to the heart of what we're talking about today. How often does the fear of our own end just paralyze us? It keeps us from actually living the life that's right here, right now. Just think about it for a second. Think of all the mental energy you spend worrying about the future, about what might happen, about that inevitable end. That's the energy we can reclaim, the energy this framework says we can plow back into living a much fuller life. To make this all feel a bit more real, let's talk about Sarah. Now, on paper, she's got it all figured out. She's got a high-pressure corporate job in a big city, and she's always prided herself on being in control. I mean, this is a woman who manages huge projects, nails impossible deadlines, and just thrives on that pressure. But then, her world gets turned completely upside down. Her father passes away after a short, brutal illness, and suddenly, all the logic and systems she relies on at work, they offer zero comfort. And this right here, this is such a common experience. It's not just the grief, which is heavy enough. Sarah gets ambushed by this deeper, more existential anxiety. It's actually a classic trigger for what experts call thanatophobia, the clinical fear of death. For Sarah, every little thing becomes a reminder. A headline about some accident, a passing ambulance siren, even just a quiet moment alone in her apartment, it all spirals into this confrontation with her own mortality. It is an exhausting, draining internal monologue that's making it impossible to grieve or really to live. So one night, she's just desperately scrolling online, looking for anything that might offer some kind of relief. And she finds it, a turning point. It's a book with this incredibly direct, almost gutsy title. It doesn't promise some spiritual awakening or years of therapy. No, it promises a framework, a toolkit. And for someone like Sarah, who builds her entire life on structure and logic, this is like a lifeline. So this is where we're going to begin our deep dive. So who exactly is our guide on this pretty intense journey? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Kelvin H. Chin is not your typical spiritual guru, not at all. His background is this amazing blend of, left brain logic and right brain empathy. You've got these Ivy League law degrees. We're talking rigorous analytical thinking, but then you also have decades of on-the-ground work as a healthcare ombudsman, a medical ethics mediator, and a world-renowned meditation teacher. It's this completely unique perspective that has helped people in over 70 countries. If you're serious about mastering your mindset and living with more purpose, you should probably hit that subscribe button right now, because you are not going to want to miss our weekly deep dives into transformative ideas just like this one. And this, right here, is the core promise of the entire book. Chin's framework is built to be radically inclusive. It is not asking you to change your beliefs one bit. It doesn't matter if you're a devout Christian, a committed atheist, or somewhere in the middle. The whole point is to work within the worldview you already have to dismantle the specific fears that pop up because of it. It's a toolkit, not a new religion. It's all about understanding the engine of your fear, not trying to replace it with a totally new one. Okay, so to give you the absolute most value from this explainer, I've broken the book down into these key pillars. We're going to start with the author's own story, what got him here. Then we'll get into the intellectual core of the book, the 4 belief systems. After that, we're going to untangle this crucial difference between death and dying, look at a really practical tool to manage anxiety, and then finally see what it really looks like to get back all that energy you've been losing to fear. Every powerful idea has an origin story, right? And for Kelvin Chin, this was never some abstract academic exercise. No, this was a deeply personal mission, one that was forged in the fire of his own loss. Understanding his journey is absolutely key to getting the compassion and the logic that's baked into every part of his work. This timeline really shows you how the idea grew. It all kicks off in 1982. A personal tragedy just completely blindsides him. He's a law student, trained to think in a straight, analytical line, and suddenly he's thrown into a situation that just defies all logic. And that pushes him onto a whole new path. In the 80s, as an ombudsman, he gets this frontline view of how real people face mortality, not in theory, but in the day-to-day reality of nursing homes. Then, by the 90s, he's in the thick of it, mediating these incredibly intense end-of-life conflicts between families and hospitals. You can just see how every step adds a new layer of understanding.
So when the book finally comes out in 2016, it isn't some sudden idea. It's the culmination of more than 30 years of intense hands-on experience.
This is it. This is the moment, the catalyst. Chin was in his early 30s, his mom just in her mid-50s, full of life. And then they get this diagnosis. That quote is so raw, so stark, raisin bread. It's a detail that just perfectly captures the brutal, overwhelming reality of that moment. He said her death shook me to my core, and that pain demanded an answer, and turned an abstract question into this urgent, personal investigation that would basically define the rest of his life's work. Okay, so now we get to the intellectual heart of the book. This is the core framework that Chin developed to bring some kind of order to the chaos of existential fear. It's a way to categorize and actually understand where our anxieties are coming from, no matter what our culture or beliefs are. So, the most important thing to get here is this. This framework is a diagnostic tool. It is not a new set of beliefs you have to adopt. The word taxonomy is just perfect. You know, like how a biologist classifies animals to understand them better, Chin classifies our beliefs about death to help us pinpoint exactly what it is we're afraid of. Because, let's face it, a vague, undefined fear is impossible to fight. But a fear you can name, a fear you understand, now that is something you can actually work with. Once you can name it, you can start to disarm it. And this is where it all really starts to click. Let's walk through these. For System 1, that's the atheist or the secularist, the fear isn't about punishment, it's about oblivion. The idea that your consciousness just stops, that every memory, every person you've loved, every experience just vanish. For System 2, which you see in many major religions, the fear is all about judgment, retribution. Did I live a good enough life to avoid, eternal punishment? That fear is rooted in your own moral scorecard. Now, System 3 seems positive, a belief in heaven, but the fear here is actually two-sided. One is anxiety about the physical pain of the dying process, and the other is that nagging doubt, am I actually worthy of getting in? And finally, System 4, the belief in reincarnation. Here the fear is of the unknown. Where do I go next? What kind of karmic debt am I carrying? Am I going to have to learn all these same lessons all over again? I'm curious, which one of these resonates most with you? Or maybe it's a mix. Let us know in the comments. It is fascinating to see how these patterns show up for different people. All right, this next concept is one of the most powerful and just plain useful insights in the entire book. It's a really simple distinction, but man, it has the power to untangle a huge knot of anxiety for so many of us, especially like we just saw for people in Belief System 3. So this slide lays out that critical difference. Chin argues that when most people say, I'm afraid of death, what they often really mean is, I'm afraid of the process of dying. They're afraid of the potential for pain, for losing control, for suffering, for becoming a burden to their family, and that is a totally valid, understandable fear of a biological process. But the state of being dead, that's a completely different concept. For a System 1 believer, it's a state of non-experience, right? So logically, there's nothing to be afraid of in that state. For other systems, it's a transition. So by uncoupling these two ideas, you can tackle the fears one at a time. You can address the fear of the dying process with practical things, palliative care, anxiety management, end-of-life planning. And you can address the fear of being dead with the logic of your own belief system. Okay, so we've deconstructed our fear with logic. But what do you do in the moment, when that wave of panic or anxiety hits you? This is where Chin gives us a physiological tool, something designed to work on the body, not just the mind. Think of it as a form of biohacking for your nervous system. The book talks about this technique, turning within, in very scientific terms. See, fear isn't just a thought, it's a full body reaction. It triggers your sympathetic nervous system, your body's fight or flight response, and it floods you with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. So this technique isn't some mystical practice, it's a way to consciously flip the opposite switch, to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, what they call the rest and digest state. It's basically a way to tell your body, on a chemical level, hey, you're safe, you can stand down now. And the process itself breaks down into these simple, actionable steps. First, you just build awareness. You learn to recognize the signs, the racing heart, the shallow breathing, the tension in your shoulders, the physical signature of fear. Then you apply the technique, which the book says is simple and effortless. You're not forcing anything. The goal is to consciously trigger a state of deep physiological rest. And this isn't just about calming down. It's about fundamentally rebalancing your blood chemistry, bringing down that cortisol, and easing the chronic stress that literally damages your body at a cellular level. It's a way to gain real mastery over your body's most primal panic button. We're going this deep into the framework because, honestly, we believe understanding these ideas can be genuinely life-changing. We never, ever compromise on the depth of our summaries. If you're finding this explainer valuable, please consider supporting the channel by joining our membership. You'll get access to exclusive content, and you'll help us keep creating these deep dives. Okay, coming up next, we're going to see how Sarah puts all of this together, and I'll share a real-life story that shows just how incredibly fast this framework can work. So what's the end game here? What's the ultimate payoff for doing all this work? Well, it's not about becoming totally fearless. It's about what you do with the energy you get back from that fear. This final part is all about the after picture, that profound shift from a life that's hemmed in by dread to one that's defined by being present. Let's go back to Sarah. Fast forward 6 months. After she reads the book, she figures out her fear is kind of a hybrid of System 1 and System 3, a fear of nothingness mixed with a deep anxiety about the dying process. Using the book's logic, she started to separate the two. And when that panic would start to rise up at her desk or in the middle of the night, she used a turning within technique. The change wasn't just in her head. That constant low-grade hum of anxiety just faded. All the energy she had been pouring into dread was now free for other things. She's more present at work, more engaged with her friends. She's finally able to actually grieve her father properly, honoring his memory by living her own life more fully and with way more joy. And look, Sarah's story isn't just some made-up concept. It reflects real-world results. Check out this testimonial from a reader named Candace Dahlenberg. She wrote, "My crippling panic attacks, which had seemed to last forever, cleared overnight. Wow. That just speaks to the power of finding the right tool for the right problem. When you can correctly diagnose the source of your fear and then apply a direct, logical, and physiological solution, the results can be incredibly fast and profound." So how can you start putting this into practice right now? Okay, here is a simple challenge for you for the next 7 days. First, just build your awareness. Try to identify one moment each day where you feel that pull of existential dread or anxiety about the future. Second, just acknowledge it. No judgment, don't fight it. Just say to yourself, okay, there's that fear again. And third, consciously redirect. Take the energy you would have spent worrying and just pour it into something that's right in front of you. I mean, really tasting your coffee, or fully listening to a song, or being completely engaged in a conversation. It's a small act of taking your energy back one moment at a time. So, we've covered the core of Kelvin Chin's framework, identifying your fear in the 4 belief systems, separating the fear of dying from the fear of being dead, and using the turning within technique to manage your body's anxiety. And all that brings us to our final question. This is really the whole point of the entire framework. It's not just about not being afraid of death, it's about living a better life, right now. If you weren't spending all that mental and emotional energy on dreading the inevitable, what would you create? What would you build? Who would you become? If you found this deep dive into mindset and mortality useful, you are going to love our explainer on Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which you can watch right here. Thanks so much for watching. Keep learning, keep growing, and I will see you in the next one.